which would include Hebrew, Modern Hebrew, and Paleo-Hebrew. I'll read that again, which would include Hebrew, Modern Hebrew, and Paleo-Hebrew. Shalom everyone, and praise the Most High for another Sabbath. It is September 9th, 2017. I've got another lesson dealing with the search for the real Hebrew language, if there is any real Hebrew language that was original. When it is found, that by whoever finds it, or when the Most High restores it, it could be found to not be Hebrew, but something that's called something else. The more I look into this, I realize that even among experts, there are dividing views, and there are very convincing arguments on both sides. That this Hebrew was the original language and so on. It's funny that, and by the way, my title for this is Qimant and Modern Hebrew. Qimant, speaking of the Qimant people, and that would be spelled Qimant. Normally you see Qu, this one doesn't have U, or sometimes Qemant. But I've got a couple different ways to spell it. But in looking up on this Hebrew language, I realized that when the language experts are looking into ancient languages, they just come around to a point where they're like, really don't know what the original language was. Although people out there say this or that language was the original. But eventually they're like, so it's kind of interesting. And something that I hope I remember to mention it again at the end of this. But it's like we're so attracted to Hebrew because we're told the Bible is written in Hebrew. I was listening to a recording yesterday. I don't remember who did the recording from YouTube, and they're talking about the translation of the Bible by the Greeks. And as soon as they put the Bible in Greek, made the Septuagint, then just shortly after that, the Hebrews began to use this translation as in Greek as their code of law, basically. And it just seems kind of strange to me, Now that's not absolute, because as you read some more, you get to find out that they went back to the Hebrew language. But to have gone over to the Greek translation and start to use that, this really seems kind of odd. It makes me wonder if people are out there playing with the history. Because why... And by the way, when they're translating into Greek, the Greek language did not have the ability to translate some words. So you are then left with a substandard text. So why would a Hebrew, knowing how important the language is and how important the scrolls are, try to switch to a Greek text, a Greek rendition of the text, of what Moses said and so on? It just seems kind of silly. It's like someone is forcing through a moving away from the Hebrew or whatever the language was, as it is said, the language of the Hebrews. Actually, let me see if I can find it here. Hold on. As I've told you, the Bible says the language of the Hebrews is like someone is trying to get away from finding out or from stating clearly what the language was. And then so we just say it's Hebrew. And because that doesn't seem too sellable, like you can't sell that too well, you say, well, because there are problems with Hebrew as you know today, or modern Hebrew, then we just say, or they told us, because we just started reading the Bible 20, 30 years ago, just to make fun of the timing. We just started reading it recently, and we were told, well, it's Paleo-Hebrew, it's ancient Hebrew. Because people find out that there's a problem with modern Hebrew, then they say, well, it's Paleo-Hebrew. But before, people were arguing. As long as we accepted that it was Hebrew, they never but told us it's Paleo-Hebrew. It was just fine. But when you start arguing now and say, no, something's wrong with this Hebrew, well, it's actually ancient Hebrew that it was written in. But as prior to that, it was written in Hebrew. You see, the more people dig and question, the more you realize that the world and what's presented to us is not the way it really is given to us. If Paleo-Hebrew is all that, and I'm not saying it's not a powerful language, because it clearly is, then whoever was trying to translate it, I mean, it's more that they didn't want it around because it was too strong, it was too powerful. And what better way to water down the word of the Most High, which will cause a problem for the people of the book, if you get it out of its language and put it in other language that it was not meant to be translated into. So, whichever kings and emperors and so on were involved in this stuff, and the people who perpetuate this kind of stuff today, in printing more and more Bibles, they're all involved in it. Because listen, if you say it is Paleo-Hebrew that it was written in, why can't you print Paleo-Hebrew in the back of the Bibles? Because a person who, like we speak English here, who never knew one Hebrew word, and they sat in the Christian church for like 20 years and never cared about one Hebrew word or one sentence. When they start to study Torah, they realize they gotta look at Hebrew words. So they learn their first Hebrew word, whatever it is. They have to start to understand that new word and each letter. It's no more of a stretch for them, I would think, to learn the Paleo-Hebrew characters than it is to learn the modern characters and to learn any supposed pronunciation of the Paleo-Hebrew that's there than it is to learn the modern Hebrew. So you could have just given us the Paleo-Hebrew at the back of our Bible. Still give us in English because we got to still read because we don't know the Paleo-Hebrew either. But when you're putting the write-up in the Hebrew at the back of the Bible or wherever you put it on the page, just print it in Paleo-Hebrew. And as we learned the modern Hebrew letters, we would have learned the Paleo-Hebrew letters. So then anyone involved in giving the Bible would be making their best attempt at coming as close as possible to what the Creator said when he spoke to Moses and the prophets and so on. That means that whoever is putting out the Bible in the world so that, as far as I understand, it still remains the best-selling book or the most widely spread book on the earth, probably printed in over 2,500 languages. Whoever is doing that is spreading the Bible so far around. Why are you really doing it? I mean, if I'm being accusatory, then I would just say that you're trying to make money or something like that. Because if you're trying to get people to hear what God said, and if you tell a sentence at the front of the room, it's going to end up being different than the back of the room, wouldn't you just print it in the Paleo-Hebrew that you say was found so that people get the best effort from you? So that whenever the message gets to the back of the book, back of the room, people can just look at the Paleo-Hebrew that you printed and know what God said. Or a best attempt at finding out what he said, since we might still not be fully correct about the Paleo-Hebrew. So if people are spending all this money and effort and time into printing books in languages that don't have anything to do with the, and all these languages that the Bible are printed in, and Paleo Hebrew is so little spoken of. You want to find Paleo Hebrew mainly because you search for it online, or you go buy a book about it.
Certain cultural principles of a people and abstract it and formulate religion out of it. Now let me get deeper into the word Hebrew, because the word Hebrew again is being misunderstood. I'm a Hebrew because that's my nationality. I'm an Israelite because that's my tribal heritage. I'm a Hebrew because I descend from the man Eber. That's what makes me a Hebrew. And later on, it became known as the language of the Hebrews. When you actually read the scripture, it doesn't call our language Hebrew. It says the language of the Hebrews. That's what it says. So Hebrews is actually a nationality of people. I'm an Israelite because I'm a descendant from the Hebrew man Yaakov, Jacob, whose name was changed to Yasha'Allah or Yisrael, which means Prince of Power. So even when you deal with the Moorish Science Temple, they even have at the end of their name El, because it symbolizes power. On it became known as the language of the Hebrews. When you actually read the scripture, it doesn't call our language Hebrew. It says the language of the Hebrews. That's what it says.
Okay, so that part there, how he's pointing out, that's the mighty Hebrew, how he's pointing out that it actually says the language of the Hebrews. So, like we all say, it's Hebrew, it's Hebrew. But here again, like I said before, and it's written up in the scriptures, I covered it in the first couple of videos on the Hebrew search, it actually says the language of the Hebrews, as if there's an attempt being made to not quite spell it out. If it was very clear in scripture that the language was Hebrew, it would silence all these worldwide experts who are saying it is not clear. The Bible clearly says the language of, but the language Hebrew is read into the text of the Bible by the coloring of the presence of Hebrew in that time and the use of Hebrew today and so on. So there's still a search going on. But it says the language of the Hebrews. Now, this Qimant people I came across in my search, and I'm going to read here a little from Wikipedia before I get into something else I want to read from here, dealing with the Qimant people. It says the Qimant are a small subgroup of the Agar people in Ethiopia who traditionally practiced an early Hebrew religion. Despite their historic relationship, they should not be confused with the Beta Israel or with the Falasha. I added the Falasha part right there. If you read up some more on this, it's eventually going to come up with information that says the Qimant might have come from Canaan, so a son of Canaan. So it's like the idea is there that these might not be actual Israelites, but who knows? That takes more looking into. I want to read some more on this group of people, because these are Cushitic people, and I'm getting the sense more and more that the Israelites have something to do strongly with the Cushites, and when you're dealing with Ethiopia. Remember, Ethiopia was mentioned real early in Genesis in the creation account, and a river ran by Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is there, and we know the people in Ethiopia today are different. They're not the original. So there's something there that I want to look into some more. Now, of this Qimant people, they're saying The ethnicity population is roughly 172,000 according to the 1994 national census. The latest available national census, the one performed in 2007, does not list them as a separate group. So you notice some change going on there, right? Not a separate group. So now it's like you're seeing another shift again with another group of people, and it's like they're again now being assimilated into other groups around them. So it's like we're losing another group of people in terms of identity again. But anyway, they're not listed as their own separate group anymore in the census, which is just somebody, whoever is running the census and who controls them is making that happen. Because if you got a group that's been on its own for so long, there is no need to not list them anymore in a file that you are making on your computer to record the information about these people and write in your file that they are not separate anymore. They can still be a separate group, but just living in another land among other people. So someone is trying to change it so that another 100 years from now, nobody knows who the Qimant people are. So now, this 172,000 people, now they're saying, however, only 1,625 people still speak Qimant, and it is considered endangered, as most children speak Amharic. Likewise, adherence to the traditional religion has dropped substantially, as most of the population has converted to Christianity. Converts often consider themselves to have become Amhara. I think I read someplace else last week as well when I was looking at it, that with that very, very sharp drop to now 1,625 are speaking the Qimant language. That's now telling you that most of these little ones that's left now speaking it, it's like it's not publicly spoken. It's just like they're speaking privately, like among themselves, like in their own home and among like close family members. So it's like it's still there, but it's no longer a public language then. But obviously, whoever is still speaking it is trying to keep it alive, and they just can't get away from it and so on. So you see a language dying out right there. Another Kushite language, which eventually we'll learn is Afro-Asiatic language, family kind of language as well. Now, as their identity is drying up, and they're going to tell us that these are from one of the sons of Canaan, so they're basically trying to tell you that this is not Israelites and so on. I don't know, but could it be? Quite possibly, maybe. Because even if the people who studied them well, or the people themselves, tell you that we're from one of the sons of Canaan, then, I mean, Jeremiah 17:4 says we're going to disconnect from our inheritance, and that translates eventually to disconnecting from your identity, because your inheritance is based on your identity. So once you lose your identity, it is quite possible that you're going to say you descend from somebody else, because you've lost your identity. You don't know your head from your foot anymore. Just like we grew up learning that we're Jamaicans, and it just stops there. Until you realize, oh, well, it might be from the Arawaks, and then the Arawaks came from Africa, and next thing you know, you're African. And there's never a talk that was told to us anytime in school when I was growing up that you are of the children of Israel. So if they're saying that they are of this or that son, that doesn't mean anything, because as they are showing right here in Wikipedia, that they are now being absorbed into other people groups. Another 100 or 200 years from now, they're going to tell you that these people are somebody else. So if they have strong Hebraic culture about them, it could be that they were Israelites who ended up in that particular area where they're at. And remember, when you're dealing with these so-called African or Kushite type people, Bantu, kind of people. They were always on the move for a couple thousand years. Always. They just didn't stay still all the time. They were always on the move. And as they moved around, they sometimes set up shop where they are on their own. Other times they would merge with other people groups and grow and live together. So their identity might change in terms of the name that they're under. But they would have been the Israelites who's just traveling around and moving around because they're out of their land or because they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So it is possible that these people could really be the Israelites. And the more I read it, that's the more sense I'm getting. But look at this now. They divide themselves, the Qimant, under two patrilineal lines. So basically we see here again, if we deal with the Israelites having gone by the seed of the Father, here that's how these people seem to be living and carrying themselves as well. Now let's look at their religion. The Qimant traditionally practiced a religion which is often described as pagan Hebraic. Somebody says, now, see, I tell you these people are not Israelites, but that shouldn't really threaten any thought that says they may be Israelites, because we know the Israelites were kicked out of the land because they became like heathen. So they already, from Bible times, mixed themselves with cultures and practices of the heathen. So that doesn't really threaten anything much right there, right? They combined elements from both, well, they're saying Judaism right here, but we know when you really get into it, there's more talk of Hebraic practices, and the word Hebrew starts to come into the picture. So Judaism is just this whole fake modern kind of stuff to show you who God is not. So they combine elements of both Judaism and paganism. Hebraism is an ancient form of, and then they switch back now to Hebraism, the word, as opposed to Judaism, right? Their Hebraism, according to the American scholar Frederick C. Garnst, their Hebraism is an ancient form. Notice that he said it's an ancient form. So even though Wikipedia mentioned Judaism for a more modern spin on things, this writer is trying to take this Qimant people farther back than Judaism, which came into the world later on. And he's saying their Hebraism is an ancient form. See that? So you're going back to more like Moses kind of stuff, right? And more ancient form and unaffected by Hebraic change of the past 2 millennia. Now, this people somehow were managed to keep the form of their ancient Hebraic practices and rituals and lifestyle. Well, I could have just said culture for all of that. They managed to keep that all the same, unchanged for so long, for 2 millennia. It's like it's ingrained in them, like it's just like something in their DNA, might I say. That comes from somewhere. It's built into them. They just live like this all the time. So could that be because they link to ancient Hebrews? Like I said, I just started reading on it, so it could possibly be I might learn more if I keep reading on it. A recent sociolinguistic survey notes that the Qimant religion is in a very precarious situation, since very few people still adhere to it. And see that again, very few people. Showing you that it is so ancient that, you know how people are always changing and moving on to modern things and modern religions and modern lifestyles and so on. So again, it being that ancient, so that people are pulling away from it, is showing you that this stuff is really old, which could possibly link back to the whole Moses bit and the ancient Israelite bit and so on, right? Because we got kicked out of the land, but we ended up going in different areas. I'm looking at stuff yesterday, studying some other stuff, showing how the Amorites came over to America and to Canada, and they came over, I think I mentioned this in some video a long time ago too, the Amorites, how they even came over as giants a couple thousand years ago to Canada and then went over to the US as well. They came over to Canada and they were looking for children to offer to eat and to offer as well in a pagan sacrifice, which today is called Halloween, but it was called a different name back then. And there's the Amorites, and then they went over to then they went down by the St. Lawrence River and went over to the U.S. and so on, right? And then later on you had like Greeks and the Romans and so on. So you see, these people are all moving around, right? It just lets you know that things change so fast that when you see this kind of stuff about, oh, these people might be somebody else, the world has changed so fast. People moved around so much that you can't necessarily dismiss this particular group of people because they could very well be of ancient Israelites. Because when these different people came over to the Americas, Canada and America, like I just mentioned, they didn't keep the same name. Eventually, over time, they changed their names. And they took on different practices as well. So there are a lot of the Amorites and the Hittites right here in America and in Canada, and the Romans and the Greeks. They're changing up words, changing up all the time, so that every 100 or 200 years, people have to go through some learning curve to find out what was there just 100 years before. So the Qimant religion is in a precarious situation since very few people still adhere to it. According to this study, the ratio of those who follow the Qimant religion, that was very, very seriously Hebraic, versus those who are baptized and converted to Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity is about 1% versus 99%. So that means 1% of people still follow that ancient Hebraic Moses type kind of belief from Torah, and 99% have switched over to this modern Christian religion and are getting baptized in this religion. So you see, the modern Christian stuff coming out of Rome has done its job of just permeating throughout the world. It's eating up what was there. Yet this people still manage to maintain this strong kind of Hebraic presence as much as things are changing. And they mention the different practices that they have that are rooted in the book of Leviticus and so on, and their sacrifices and the groves and so on, and they talk about Abraham planted a grove, stuff like that. So, and look at this now. This is not a part of it, but I'll throw this in quickly before I move on. As I'm talking about, lately I'm hinting on the name of God because I'm searching out the name of God to see what the Bible really says. So here now, they're going to talk about the Qimant now and who they say about God. One paragraph. The Qimant call the deity, by the way, they observe the Sabbath as well on Saturday and so on. The Qimant call the deity Adara, God. That's A-D-A-R-A, Adara, God. So Adara for them is God, or Ye'adara, my God. Or Mezgana, which seems to be his proper name. He is described as omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, anthropomorphic. He is approachable directly or through Kedas, which are angels or culture heroes. That's interesting. I want to look at that some more. And they use also their highest religious leader is high priest, and they go on with it some more. But when you look at this now, they call their deity Adara, which is just their way of saying God. The way we'll say God, but we know God is not his name, or instead of El, they just say God, or my God. And they tell what those words mean, Adara and Ye'adara. But when they mention what seems to be his actual proper name, Mezgana, they don't bother try to tell what that one means. You see how what I was saying earlier about not printing the Bible with the original or the so-called Paleo-Hebrew? Here it is. Whoever is writing this Wikipedia article, they don't mind telling you that the people call God in their own language, call him by his title God by using a word Adara, or my God Ya'adara. But when they are going to tell you about what they call him as his proper name, Mezgana, they don't bother try to put the brackets to tell you what that word actually means. So the world is set in a way where if you want to find God, you have to want to find him, to do some extra digging and searching. They said they call God Adara and they put in brackets God. So they're letting you know Adara to them means God. And they said, or they might call him Ye'adara and they put in brackets my God, letting you know Ye'adara to them means my God. But when they put his proper name, Mezgana, they don't bother put no brackets to tell you what that might mean. So only the person who really wants to find out more about what ancient people, especially ancient people having strong Hebraic practices, might have called the God of Israel, even if they changed the name for him after they moved out of the land. It's not so easy to find that out. Unless you want to find out, you got to do extra searching. Because here it is, a people that they're mentioning have very, very like ultra strong Hebraic roots. Have a personal name for God that's different from what you ever learned of in your Bible or in any church you went to. And they don't want to put no brackets to explain what that name of God means to this very ancient people, whose culture and identity is being so threatened that they're being carefully changed according to their identity. So there's another word for you to look up if you're trying to find God yourself. The word is Mezgana. I'll just throw that into the list of words I'm looking in to see what God's name really is. I'm not telling you that his name isn't this or that or whatever else, right? I'm just saying I'm searching because so many names are out there. And the Hebrew language has turned out to be very disappointing for me. Having started to learn a couple years ago, dropped off. Now I found out Israelite stuff. So now I pick it back up. Only to find out that as I learn the language, it seems strange in some ways. It seems very strange. And I was watching the 10 Commandments movie with Charlton Heston maybe a month ago. And it's funny that I realized when Moses fled from Egypt and he eventually made it to the territory of the Midianites and he saw the women there at the well and so on, then you get a little stone being shown when he's fighting off the men that came, like these Ammonites that came, threatening the women who were at the well. They showed what I didn't know as a child was the Paleo Hebrew, was now I know. They show the stone at the bottom of the well, and they don't show it so you can make it out easily. You got to try to stop it at the right moment and try to look at it carefully and whatever, try to figure it. And I think they showed it twice. They showed it once very fast, and they moved off of it to showing the rest of the well and showing the people and so on, and showing Moses fighting them. And then they came back to it quickly again and showed it very quickly, and they moved off again, the Paleo Hebrew. You see what I'm telling you? Whoever made that movie and whoever is involved in spreading information about God on the earth is doing it in a way where it's difficult for you to find God, but in a way where you cannot say they sat on information but never shared it with the world. So it's like their judgment might be coming, but they can probably try to get a discount by saying, instead of hitting us with your full fist, just hit us with maybe 4 of your fingers and not the full 5-finger slap, because at least we shared something with the world. Because if they're sitting on ancient information and they're not giving you the full amount, you can't really say they didn't give you anything, because the creator would be like, so okay, you are in power, you rule, you find all this information about the creator, about me, and you never shared it with the world. They're like, no, we shared it with the world, but the people just didn't want to read enough. You know, so but they come off the Paleo Hebrew very, very quickly, so it's hard to see. Now, if they wanted you to really find out what God said, and they spend so much time focusing on every other little thing in the movie, why can't they just shine the camera long enough for like 5 seconds long while Moses and the women and the men are talking, and the Paleo Hebrew down by their foot? Why? It's because it's being hidden. There is a trick in it. Either the Paleo-Hebrew is it, and they don't want you to know long enough, so they're not going to shine it, the camera on it long enough, or the Paleo-Hebrew is not it, but they tease you with it to make you think it's it by flashing it, and because you are denied it, you think it's it, so you go after it. But there are other languages that pose a serious threat, study-wise, to Paleo-Hebrew. I'm finding so many different languages that I want to look into, and because I'm just starting out, like, it's going to take me a very long time, but, I'm just searching, like, I may come around to saying Paleo-Hebrew is what I'll settle on, but at least I want to go through some time and search up, because I just feel funny about this Paleo-Hebrew. Like I said before, if Abraham came among the Canaanites and they're calling him Abraham the Hebrew, why? When they were already speaking Hebrew themselves. So it's nothing unique, as if they spoke some other language, like they spoke Spanish and he came speaking Hebrew, so they're like, oh, the man that speaks Hebrew over there that just came to town. No, we all speak Hebrew. Or why didn't they call him Abraham the Aramaic, or the Aramean, or something like that? Because because he spoke Aramaic, and Aramaic was a lingua franca, if he needs to use Aramaic to speak to communicate with them in their version of Hebrew, then they would just know him as the Aramaic guy who needs to use Aramaic in order to communicate with us, because he speaks some kind of Hebrew, but it's a different kind of Hebrew than we have, so he has to use Aramaic to try to bridge the gap to communicate with us. So they would just know him as the Aramaic guy. But they don't do that. They say he's the Hebrew-speaking guy when they all spoke Hebrew. Like if a fake alien comes here on Earth driving a car, you're going to say, oh, the alien with the car, when all aliens and all people on Earth are already driving cars. It doesn't really say anything much about him. But now if you say something slightly different, like the alien who bought the first car, then you can say, okay, it's that particular alien that lives over there. Because everybody knows he bought the first car because he came in a ship like the other aliens. So it doesn't really, you see what I mean? Alright, okay, so let me move off this Wikipedia stuff. By the way, okay, this last part from Wikipedia dealing with their history, the origins of the Qimant are unknown. The origins of the Qimant are unknown. Jeremiah 17:4, I just talked about you're disconnected, so you don't know your head from your foot, you don't know who you are. Their origin is unknown due to lack of a written history. According to oral tradition, the founder of the Qimant was a man called Anair, who is said to have been a grandson of Canaan, son of Ham, son of Noah. After 7 years of famine in his own country, he is said to have come to the area of Lake Tana in Ethiopia, as he traveled with his wife and children and so on. Anyway, and so there again, just, some more information. Anyway, now if I look at this article here, Language and Cultures, and the title of the article is Origin of Amharic, Tigrinya, and Tigray Languages by Dr. Orville Boyd Jenkins. And this person always has some strong information. I've read from him a number of times over the past 2 or 3 years. Ge'ez is the root language for the 3 related languages Amharic, which the Qimant people are now speaking. It's a root language of the 3 related languages Amharic, Tigrinya, and Tigray. Years ago when I was in the Christian church, I met some people who were from Ethiopia, and I forgot the man's name now, but he had a daughter whose name was Tigray or Tigris, something like that. So, it's too bad in those times as a Christian I didn't care about searching and digging into the Bible. As long as I could speak in tongues and shake, it was all right, and the music and the drums was banging, it was all right. But too bad, because, if I knew where to find them now, I could ask them about some of this stuff, because they might be able to more understand it for me. But anyway, it just goes to show that when you're sitting in the Christian church, you don't really dig as much because you feel you get revelation from God. Tigray, Tigrinya, and Amharic are all descended from the earlier language Ge'ez. These three are like sister languages. I'm reading some and throwing some in my own words just to try to cut out some of the reading. Ge'ez is one of the several languages in the Semitic group. It is more distant from the others, like Arabic and Aramaic, than some of the others are to each other. Classical Arabic and Biblical Hebrew are very similar. So I think they're trying to say here to us that Ge'ez is a little more distant. It's still Semitic, but a little more distant than Arabic or Biblical Hebrew. Of course, there are over 30 languages of Arabic today. And see, I didn't know all along. I was thinking, oh, you speak Arabic, you speak Arabic. When I'm reading stuff, I'm thinking like that. When they're Arabic really doesn't mean one language, but there are lots of languages that are termed Arabic. And many of these Arabic languages are not mutually intelligible with each other. So you can't necessarily understand each other just because you speak some kind of Arabic language. Historical and comparative linguists make it their business to gather, analyze, and compare available written or oral forms of current and historical languages. This provides a consistent pattern to indicate how the languages are related. So basically they sized up the languages, they grouped them up and so on, see which language families they might belong to, see similarities among the languages, how they developed and changed over time, the sharing and borrowing of words and even the meaning of words and so on, time periods are used and so on, to try to trace languages, right? This is what these linguists do. Now, when these languages are all compared in grammar and vocabulary, along with the oral traditions and other historical indicators, it is clear that these all developed, as did all other human languages, from an even earlier form of speech for which we have no written testimony. I'll read that again. It is clear that these all developed, as did all other human languages, which would include Hebrew, Modern Hebrew, and Paleo-Hebrew, from an even earlier form of speech for which we have no written testimony. So when somebody tells me who's studying Torah that Paleo-Hebrew is the real language, and they're like, because when I mention this Hebrew, it seems fake to me. People try to tell me, well, this is just modern Hebrew that those Jews are using over there. It's just, that's a trick language and it's not what the Hebrews spoke and so on. But they're trying to say that to me because they're trying to let me know that it's the Paleo-Hebrew that is the real one and not this modern. Well, Paleo-Hebrew might well be closer, obviously, because it's longer, right? Longer time ago. But it doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the original language. Because, I mean, how can you prove that? Now, it could be. So I'm not going to take that from anyone. But I'm just saying, like, the reason why I'm searching is I'm trying to prove it. My main thing is not to prove Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew is not the language of the Hebrews. I'm trying to see, can we test this enough to say it is? And it doesn't seem that we have clues that reach far back enough. We've got clues that reach far back, but not enough to say, aha, here it is, the smoking gun. Because they're telling you here, these are experts in the world, and they're telling you that there is an earlier form of language that was spoken for which there is no written testimony. So then, if we say it is Paleo-Hebrew that Moses spoke and wrote, and the Hebrews did and so on, we don't know what it sounds like because nobody is speaking it today as far as I know. And nobody can show it to you, that first language, because no such language has been found as far as the public knows that was written. There's no text for it. There's no alphabet for it that was written or chipped in stone anywhere. No written testimony of it. So then, what the person who's studying Torah has to keep in mind then is that language experts the world over are letting us know that there is no written or audible representation of the language that can prove what the first language was. So saying it was Paleo-Hebrew is just a very good guess that people make. Under this heading from the same article, again, the article name is The Origin of Amharic, Tigrinya, and Tigray Languages by Dr. Orville Boyd Jenkins. Under this subtitle, Early Hebrew Practices, it goes, among the Ethiopic peoples, we find Semitic characteristics that are similar to the Old Hebrew and even the later Jewish practices. It is thought that these are at least in part inherited from the old common culture from before the time when the Ethiopic peoples moved from southern Arabic onto the African mainland. So you see these Ethiopic peoples, they're telling you they moved onto the African mainland. Of course, the next person is going to tell you all of that was Africa right there. But it's showing what I said earlier, that these people, Ethiopic / Bantu type people, were always moving around. In the Horn of Africa, there is a strong base of Cushitic stock that was absorbed by dominant groups represented by the current Amhara and Tigrinya. The early Cushitic peoples are now represented primarily in the Beja cluster. The Tigray are somewhat related, but the Tigray and Beja peoples are also greatly mixed with various Arab strains, and he goes on. It is in this crux of culture and language that the Falasha or Beta Israel people fit. They originally spoke a dialect of the language called Qimant. Now, I told you earlier that the Qimant people, they were saying they were not the Beta Israel or the Falasha. Here now, we are being told that the Falasha and Beta Israel, who are different from the Qimant people, that the Falasha and the Beta Israel originally spoke a dialect of the language called Qimant. So they spake a type, the Falasha and the Beta Israel spoke a type of the same kind of language that the Qimant people speak. So there's got to be some kind of connection there, similarity with the people. Now, if you're going to say that the Falasha and so on, like these are of ancient Israelites who are in exile and so on, why wouldn't it be the case that the Qimant are as well? Although that doesn't necessarily mean. They could have just been living together or something, right? But it just so happens that these Falasha are speaking the same kind of language as the Qimant people, and the Qimant people themselves, who are separated from them, have ultra strong Hebraic practices as well. So there could very well be a connection. They could all be ancient Israelites. So they spoke a dialect of the Qimant language in the western group of Cushitic languages. You see, this Cushite stuff keeps coming in, Ethiopia stuff keeps coming in, the more you get into these people. The language is almost extinct now, as I read to you earlier. In recent years, the Falasha have come to speak mostly Tigrinya, which is one of the sister languages that came out of Ge'ez. Those who migrated to Israel proceeded to learn modern Hebrew, as with other immigrant peoples in Israel. So what I'm gathering from that is that all these people seem to have their strong languages that they've been speaking for a long time, probably hundreds of years or however long. They didn't have a problem being Hebrew and having ultra strong Hebraic practices that lead back to Moses and the Israelites of the Bible, keeping rituals and so on that were in the book of Leviticus and Exodus and so on. But as soon as modern time comes, and they get trying to connect with modern land of Israel. Probably they want a better life or something. All of a sudden now they take on Hebrew, and even if they don't move back to the land, they're found speaking Hebrew. They had their own language. They had no problems having strong Hebraic lifestyle in the language that they had, a Cushite kind of language. But as soon as modern time comes up, they have to switch to modern Hebrew. Notice that these people over that side of the world should be closer to Paleo-Hebrew. They don't switch to Paleo-Hebrew, they switch to modern Hebrew. Doesn't that sound kind of weird to you? Doesn't that sound kind of weird to you? You today, if you had a choice here in America, North America, because I'm in Canada, if you had a choice to learn something closer to the Bible, to speak either modern Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew, wouldn't you choose the Paleo-Hebrew? Yeah, of course you would, because it's harder to learn that and less people are available to teach that. So you would want that because you want to get back to as far back in history as possible where these scrolls are concerned. Yet these people on that side of the world who should be choosing Paleo-Hebrew, they're like, no, modern Hebrew. Next thing you know, you see the word Judaism starts to creep in. And some kind of pariah seems to be crawling around and consuming that which was and changing people to a new form of something. And they're now even trying to learn new modern Hebrew. Look as well now that as they keep mentioning these Cushitic peoples and Ethiopic peoples and their journeys, they keep being shown as people moving around, but the people in Ethiopia today are of mixed descent. They're a mixed kind of people. But the people who are more linked to the ancient Ethiopic peoples, like in the Beja cluster, as I just mentioned minutes ago, are the ones who can't seem to settle down properly, and they keep moving, as if they're under a curse. And they're being wiped out in terms of their identity. They might still be alive, but their name is changing, and their language is having to change and so on. It's like they're not, like they are the ones suffering the curses in the scriptures. But these people from ancient Ethiopia, they seem a little bit interesting the more I get into searching this stuff about the Hebrew language. They seem a little bit more interesting, and I remember the scripture now, it says, the Most High says, these people are like the Ethiopians, but they are not like the Egyptians. So, which is it? Are the Egyptians Ethiopians, or the Ethiopians Egyptians? Did one come out of the other? Like, what's the real deal? Are they all the same people? Well, you're going to quickly tell me no. But the Most High is here telling you they're not. So when people are saying Ethiopians are Egyptians, Egyptians are Ethiopians, what is the reason for that? And if Abraham himself was Ethiopic, what exactly does that mean? Because if he seemed to have gotten in trouble for marrying an Ethiopian woman, why is it saying it like that as if he is not Ethiopian himself? So it seems to me, with my baby level of knowledge on these historical things of nations, that when you deal with the word Ethiopia, or deal with the term Cushitic peoples, that they've gone through some changes over time. So that Ethiopia is not the Ethiopia it was in terms of the people living there. And, because the Most High did say that there was a difference. Right? You see that in Exodus 11 verse 7, it says here, but against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know how the Most High doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. So Israelites are not Egyptians. It seems like the Israelites are like Ethiopians, but different from Egyptians. And so, of course, I'm going to run to Amos 9 verse 7, where it says, Are ye not as children of the Ethiopians or the Cushites unto me, O children of Israel? Saith the Most High. Have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and so on? So he's saying, didn't I bring up Israel, a different nation, out of the land of another nation called Egypt? So he's saying, didn't I bring up a people out of Egypt who are like the Ethiopians? Didn't I bring up a people like the Ethiopians out of the land of the Egyptians? And these people are the people of Israel. Didn't I do that? That's what he's saying. So the Egyptians and the Ethiopians are different. So if Genesis quickly mentions a river running by Ethiopia, that means that Ethiopia would have been one of those ancient nations that was very strong. And from the little readings that I've been doing the past couple of weeks, Ethiopians were spreading themselves around and moving throughout Asia, different parts of the world, and conquering territories and making rise or presence to new lands, new territories, long time ago. And if we're told that Abraham was Ethiopian, then it seems that the children of Israel are more aligned to the Cushites than to the Egyptians. So then their language would somehow have something to do with a Cushite language than with Coptic then from Egypt. But I'm just saying it that way, just let you know I'm going to be now looking into different Ethiopian languages, even ones that they say are going extinct. Although I've mentioned a couple of their names here in this video, the Ge'ez and so on. The Ge'ez actually was one of the first languages that I started to look at when I considered the search for this Hebrew stuff, and I mentioned it in probably the first video last year, dealing with the search for the language. But then I quickly I just quickly shifted over to looking at Abraham and Aramaic. But it just seems to be, there's something there about Ethiopia. Ethiopia seems to have been way too strong in ancient times, and historians who fought against the Cushites, even the Romans, so are identifying these people, the Ethiopians, as being some kind of Negro type, Israelite kind of people, who we would call Israelite today, right? So, but the Egyptians seem to have been spoken of by some of these historians in a different kind of way. So that when I read of different historians, who I can't quote their names now because, I read so fast that, but at some point I'm going to try to document them and tell the names and give the references and so on as I get more settled with my time. But it seems that the Ethiopic peoples seem, from the histories that I've read, to have more of an affinity toward the things of the Most High and towards a Torah kind of lifestyle and following the instructions of the Creator than the Egyptians. The Ethiopic people might get involved in some pagan stuff sometimes, like even the Qimant people, they're Ethiopic, and it tells you quickly that their religion is like a Hebraic pagan type of religion, and I showed how they might have taken on the pagan stuff like Israel did in the Bible. But they're still Ethiopic, but you see how strongly Hebraic their practices are. But when you read more and more of Egyptians, they're different. Cushites seem to have gravitated more towards, the early Cushites, in history, seem to have gravitated more towards the things of the Most High and wanted to follow the Creator's instructions. But Egyptians now, it's like they take it or leave it, like we don't really care. The Egyptians just more gravitate to the pagan stuff and, any weird, strange kind of, like even this, I don't know. No wonder the Greeks love the Egyptian stuff when you see Egypt broadcasted so much on your TV and another documentary about Egypt. Why aren't there more documentaries about Ethiopia? You realize that? Because Ethiopia seems to me to have more of an affinity toward the things of the Most High. So now when the Most High says, the Ethiopians will be broken by my hand, like, I've never looked at the meaning of that verse, so I'm going to have to, but I'm just wondering on the spur of the moment here, if maybe he's saying that because it's not dealing with more fake Ethiopians now, or watered down Ethiopia, tricked Ethiopia, having been conquered and taken over and so on, like, trying to say that they're not the real Ethiopians. Possibly that could be a part of the meaning. But yeah, the Cushites seem to have been very, very powerful, and so that's going to be something I have to look into anyway. Cutting it here, and thanks for listening to my ramblings a little bit here. Qimant people, they took on this modern Hebrew and their language is dying out. I would think that such a people who for 2 millennia preserved very strong Hebraic practices, if they are under threat with Christianity and the language is changing and their identity and their name is changing and so on, and they have to move around from land to land and so on, it seems to me that they are closer to the ancient Hebrews and that they are closer to the language than this modern Hebrew is. Because then if you trace them and see where they came from and what they were speaking before they're where they are now, and then find out what that people were speaking before, you will get closer to the truth. But this Orthodox Christian religion is taking them over and changing them until only 1,625 speak the Qimant language. That language is under threat. It's possibly because that language tells some more about the people, which would then link us back to whoever the real Israelites were and what they really were speaking at the first.